I loved our last podcast. I thought it was really good. And we talked about some feedback you got that maybe it's not appropriate for the air. But did we get any feedback from anybody that we can share?
We can share that feedback too. I don't really care. We got good feedback from girls that have a similar story. They said they listened to the whole thing twice, actually. They didn't comment any specifics, but it mattered to them enough that they listened to it twice. So, but other reactions is like my mom texted and said, I listened to the podcast and it was really good. It hurt, but it was good. And I got frustrated because it hurt you.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know what to do with that. And you shared that with me, and that's shocking. Like, I think it took me a second when you told me that to process, like, wait, she said what? Like, I didn't understand that it hurt her, like that use. Wait, what? Like, I was trying to put that together. So, yeah, that's rough. And
it is.
How did you absorb that when she said that?
I did what every person should do, and you rant to your cousin.
And what did your cousin do?
Oh, she was right there with me. She knows. I mean, my mom is her aunt, so she knows exactly what I'm talking about. But no, I ranted for a little bit, and she ranted back. And actually, I know my mom's going to listen to this, but so several days after that, she did text again, and she said, "I'm really sorry. Would you please forgive me?" And I think that's the first time she's ever apologized or asked for forgiveness, which I forgave her a long time ago. But I think those are the first time she's ever said those words. So I was like, all right, maybe it just took you a while to sink through.
Well, and that's even though you went through the forgiving process long ago, I feel like I would like to hear that. Mm-hmm. And it's probably, it just makes things better, even if you've already done your end of it. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, is that how you felt? You're like, yeah, this is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big step forward. It's like, all right, yeah, I have forgiven you, but hearing it does, at least maybe there is some healing there on both sides.
And so for anybody who might be on the other side of this kind of thing, if there's somebody you need to apologize to, even if they're doing well, go apologize and just say hey, I recognize that I messed up, because we can all hear that. I take ownership of that.
Even if it's in the past, it still matters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you said there's girls that have gone through that, and I'm sure it was really good to know that you had an impact, and I can't imagine. And did they share anything other than just it was good to hear it? Yeah,
nothing specific. I was actually surprised the girl who told me would actually listen to it. She's young, but I was impressed that she actually listened to it.
And so for anybody, we hear from people every now and then, even though my face isn't on here very much, even I'll get feedback. And I think it's for anybody who's participating with us, we really appreciate when you guys talk to us. And so if you're watching this on YouTube and you put a little comment on there, it means a lot to us. Share your thoughts. We do care. And, thanks for having feedback. Todd, I'm looking at you because I know you had said that that's the first time you'd ever heard that whole story. And did you get feedback from anybody that you thought was worth sharing?
No. In a word, no. But I wouldn't. That it isn't my story. It's I don't. This part of her is my story, and I get a lot of feedback of who she is now and what she is now and how she carries herself now. I get that kind of feedback. But when all of that was going down, that didn't have anything to do with me. It didn't have anything to. Sorry.
No, you're good.
That didn't have anything to do with. No, but I wouldn't have expected to get any feedback from that.
Well, I know I listened to it 3 times. I thought it was I thought it was powerful. I thought it was good. I think there's a lot to learn from that. And I think people, if you're listening to this podcast, you haven't listened to Amanda's story, you need to go listen to it. I think it's a really, really powerful one. Okay. Having said that, I think today we're talking about the history of the ranch. And you guys, I mean, I put 1904 on the website. Mm-hmm. Does the story go even further back than that?
Well, I suppose that it does. That's when the ranch was homesteaded. That's when the papers were officially filed and the T's crossed and the I's dotted. But my grandfather's family came from Nebraska, and they had a ranch there. They had a farm there, and they thought it would be better here. And so my great-grandfather loaded the wagon, literally, and they started here from Nebraska. My grandfather was 10 years old when they left Nebraska. And so I think my grandfather was born in 1891, and so they came, pretty early on at the turn of the century there. I know one story that was relayed to me was they came across Black Mesa. Black Mesa today is a pretty skinny, narrow, windy road, and they came with their wagons, and the trail was so narrow that they met another wagon. He was going east, and my family was coming west. And my family's wagons, of course, were loaded, and the other man was empty. And the only way that they could pass, the trail was so narrow, the only way that they could pass is they took the wagon apart, the empty wagon. They took it apart and carried it around to the other side of the loaded wagon and put it back together. That's the only way they could go. And if you've ever been over Black Canyon, some of that is, you learn which way is down pretty quick. Some of that is a couple thousand feet to the bottom. So I thought that was kind of an interesting story. And my grandfather had relayed that to my father and then to us. And so I knew my grandfather. He didn't die until about 75-ish, 1975. And so I knew him. I got to know him.
How long did you live?
He was 83 years old. So somebody's pretty quick with math. He was born 4th of July, 91, and he died in, as I recall, it was January, and he was 83 when he died. My grandmother was born in 1892. She was a year younger than him, and she was one of the first children born at Jack's Cabin over above Gunnison. She had some Indian blood in her, and so her family came from that area, Jack's Cabin, Krusty Butte, and they settled on Minnesota Creek as well. And so we had two ranches, and my grandfather and grandmother courted. They were 4 miles apart, and so he would go down there from the place that we live on now to the lower place. And there's lots and lots of stories. I am blessed to have my grandmother's diaries from way, way back.
Wow.
So she talks about those days of courting and just odds and ends, just bits and pieces. But I remember one story that Grandpa couldn't catch his horse. When he went down there, if he turned the horse loose, he couldn't catch him, that Grandma had to go and catch his horse so he could get back home. And so it just lots of history, and that's fun stuff.
I can't even think 1904. What's happening in the world in 1904?
Well, obviously there were cars, but my family, we were all born so good looking, but not very much money, and so they used horses just a lot. My grandmother was scared to death of anything that blew diesel smoke or gasoline, but a team of horses, she loved to mow hay with a team of horses, and they mowed hay way beyond their married years with horses there on the ranch. We still have the mowing machine that she used. But if you'd get her, she would actually have panic attacks if you got her behind the wheel of something, a tractor or car or something. If something was stuck and she had to get on a tractor, she literally panicked. It just scared her to death. But a team of horses, she was fine with.
Was she worried that they were going to blow up, or?
I don't know.
bad spirits in there, demon possessed? What does somebody worry about?
The only thing that I can compare it to is this technology that we use. I'm sort of scared of that. I don't like that.
Oh, you mean like you're getting radiation in the brain or something? Yeah, we probably are.
It's just bad news, you know.
It's just not you're used to it. So I'd much rather do it with the horse than what I'm not used to.
Exactly.
It's not like it's taboo, just I'm not used to it.
Yeah.
But that trip over with the wagons was hard. They had a 2-year-old little boy that died when they arrived. His name was Milo.
A part of a part of your family? Okay.
Yeah, but so when they came across, they originally stopped in Montrose, and he died there when they arrived.
That would be my grandfather's little brother.
Yeah.
Oh no, and this is all. Oh no, the journals were your grandma's, not your grandfather's. So,
but some of the stories he relayed to her, and she put them in those diaries. And so I have this in chronological order of the account of that trip, and then from the time that she was in school up until the time she died, she kept a yearly diary. So we have a pretty good stack of diaries there at the house.
Wow, that's I have a lot of journals, and they're mostly empty. I start them and don't.
Right.
But it's such a discipline.
Yeah.
And I think, today, who knows, maybe this podcast will, one day people will be living on Mars and saying like, yeah, the Hardings came from Earth and check out this podcast.
It's all of that is interesting. All of that is, our roots run deep there. There's not very many centennial ranches. This has been in our family 120 years, same ownership. There's not a lot of places still left like that. It's very difficult.
Where did they live on your property?
So that's another interesting story. So if you've ever been down to our corral, there's what we call the old house, and there's gated pipe and stuff stacked out in front of it now, just for your reference. But that was the original house. Well,
down by the corral, like way, way down.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that was one of the original houses.
We call it the schoolhouse.
Oh, wait a second. So you're not talking about the corral way
not
past
the school corrals.
Gotcha.
Our corrals.
Down by the bridge.
Oh, okay. I remember you guys pointed. See, I'm going to see if I can take pictures of that and add it to the podcast so people can see what we're talking about. Okay. So I remember you pointing out the schoolhouse, and it's a tiny building.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like half of this basement, if that, right?
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. I do remember that. Okay.
So that was the last structure there that they lived in. The original house burnt, and so my uncle John, so that'd be my grandfather's brother, he homesteaded just south of our place. There's 160 acres there, and he went to World War I, and the clock stopped when he went into the service. There was a time period you had to make fence, make a house, maintain the place, and live on it. But when he went into the Army, I guess he went into the service. I guess I don't know which branch, and maybe there was only one in those days.
Yeah,
anyway,
I was gonna say, what could it have been?
Yeah, I guess I don't know the answer to that. But anyway, so the clock stopped. When he got out of the Army, then he went to California, and so his piece of property went back to the government, but it had a house on it. So in the wintertime, after my grandparents' house burnt, it was wintertime, and so they took horses and jacked up Uncle John's house and skidded it with runners under it and put it down there where that old house is. And they lived in that then for a while, and then it burnt down. And so some years later, they used to have school there. There was enough people living on Minnesota Creek that there was a schoolhouse down towards the big corral that you referred to a minute ago, down below us. And that building was there, and it was empty, and there was no longer school. So again, wintertime, they took horses, and they jacked that house up, and they put it on runners, and they pulled it up there on the snow. And that's the schoolhouse that's there now. And so there's been, when you say, where did they live? Well, they lived right there in that same spot, but 3 different buildings, and they stole 2 of them.
Okay. And I saw the building. It's still standing and it has the roof on it, right? So, what kind of shape is it in?
Pretty poor.
Yeah.
Pretty poor.
My brother and I, there's a tree right by that schoolhouse, and it's kind of up on the roof. And my brother and I used to climb that tree and walk on the roof. And one day he learned about it and said, don't you do that because you're going to fall through the roof into that schoolhouse. But we still did it.
Yeah. So we know it's somewhat structurally sound.
Somewhat.
It's load bearing to some degree.
To some degree. Yeah.
So when I think of stuff like that, whenever I hear, hey, there's this old thing, I just want to like restore it. Like I love the idea of restoring things. And so I remember looking at it, that's cool. What can you do with that? Maybe nothing, but it's just kind of a pretty idea.
Yeah. If somebody wanted to come along and restore it, that'd be great. I'm probably not that guy. I would like to have it restored. She always wanted to have it restored. I think the closest I'm ever going to come to it is we want to build a pantry for towels. What's that called in the bathroom?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know what it's called. A pantry for towels in the bathroom. And I want to take the door off of that old house and put it on that. And at least we'll have some of that heritage in our house.
Yeah.
So family and heritage and roots, all of that is really important to us. I want to keep the ranch a ranch if we can. It's harder every day. More people coming. Places that we used to mow hay on, our houses are growing, and more people. The bigger ranches are getting chopped up into little places, and everybody wants to live there. I can't blame them for that. It's a pretty place, but it's harder.
So you're talking about because your property can't sustain the amount of cattle you have, you are in the past been able to lease out other properties and harvest the, I was going to say wheat, but hay.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's so much influx of people who just want to settle there without having a working property, then you won't be able to get enough hay to sustain the livestock there. Am I understanding it right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's always hay. I mean, I buy it. We buy it and have it. We ship it in. And so we still have the cows, and we still do the cattle like we've had for 120 years. We just go about it a little bit differently, just switch gears a little bit. You have to be very, you can't be too, I love tradition, but tradition will kill you if you don't move along, if you don't morph along with the climate, with your environment, just a lot of things around you. If you don't move along, you will die. The ranch will die.
So I'm curious where your perspective is on this, and we don't necessarily have to dwell here, but you've seen a lot of changes. Do you think this is the most, at least for farming, the most volatile you've ever seen, or has this kind of a threat come before for farmers? There's
always a threat for farmers and ranchers. Agriculture has been in the crosshairs forever. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there's things like this bird flu. That's a real hot topic right now. It seems really odd to me that the only bird that they're targeting are chickens, and that's what we eat. We eat the chickens and we eat their eggs. It just seems like, is that really the only bird that we're going to go and kill that has bird flu? And it seemed like I'm not sure who they are, but are they going after our food supply? Same way with cattle. According to some people, the whole problem with our climate is cows fart.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure, there's other things that fart, but why are we going solely after cattle? Well, again, I'm not too much of an naysayer, but it just seems really odd to me that we're only targeting cattle.
Yeah. Yeah. That's bizarre. And you had told me about people who bought the greenhouse gas thing. You described it and I couldn't even make sense of it. And they dropped quite a chunk of change on this thing, and it was useless, right? Because it actually there isn't not enough gases from the cows for it to even function. You told me that story, right?
So I'm not quite sure which story. I tell a lot of stories.
Okay.
So I'm not quite sure which story, but I know that like hog farmers, I know that they have built this methane gas collection apparatus over their hog barns, over that operation, and they collect the methane. And they're able to use that methane then for generation. Maybe they use it in a generator. Maybe they they collect it and they're able to use it. And so I know that there are the I know that animals produce methane, but I just don't think that we're making as big as a footprint against the environment as some would have us believe.
I remember seeing a picture on social media where somebody had like a city and then like this ranch, beautiful ranch, and they said, so this is the problem?
Exactly.
Like it's pretty, hey, I'm a city boy. I've got nothing going, but even I'm like, that's absurd. That's just insane how you're right. There's got to be some reason that's happening. And gosh. Okay, so we left off at the building gets moved. The old schoolhouse gets moved over there. And so did we leave off with your grandparents or your parents?
So that's really my grandparents lived there. And then my folks got married in 52, pretty sure, 52. And Dad fixed that old house up, the schoolhouse. He fixed that up, and they made garden, and they had a fence around the yard, and they were going to live there. And my mom's dad, my grandfather, they had a place on Rogers Mesa. He was a fruit grower there on Rogers Mesa. And Mom and Dad were pretty proud of that little house, and my grandfather came and looked at it and said, no way are you going to live here. You're not going to live here with this hillbilly. At some point, Amanda can tell you that story, and maybe that's today. I don't know.
Let's hear it.
My grandparents have the cutest, like, romantic story ever, and I sat down and wrote it down as they told me because it is just so cute. But so my grandma, she had been out of high school and she was a secretary, however you say that.
Yeah.
And
wait, can you really not say secretary?
only when I can't think of it.
I thought that was going to be like just a quirk. Oh, I say secretary.
No, it's only when I can't get my mouth to work. Anyway, so she had just broken up with her boyfriend and she was just heartbroken. So her best friend came over and said, there's this dance and you're going to go with me. And you're going to dance with some other guys and you're going to get over whatever his name was. And
he was a shoe salesman.
He was, because later when they were engaged, he came and said, if you'll dump him and come back to me, I will buy you whatever shoes you want.
What a deal.
Yeah, she wasn't interested. But anyway, so the friend said, you're going to come with me to this dance. And on the way, they were walking and they met this stranger. And he talked to him for a little bit and went on his way. And the friend said, when we go to this dance, you stay away from that guy. His name is Dallas, and he's just a troublemaker. And just stay away from him. And so they went to this dance. And here comes this guy that they talked to earlier named Dallas. And sat on her lap, and she was eating a sandwich, and grabbed her sandwich and ate her sandwich, and then dug through her purse and found a paycheck and said, wow, you get paid enough. Why don't you just get married? And so they danced all night, and he took her home, and the friend just thought that was terrible because the one guy she said stay away from, here she's dancing with him and going home with him. And anyway, when they get to the house to have him drop her off, he leans in for a kiss, and she says, oh, no, I don't kiss goodnight. And he said, well, I'll just kiss you hello then, and kissed her.
And she was just won over by all that.
Oh, yeah, she thought that was great. But then she didn't see him for a long time. He just kind of fell off the planet, and he was in hunting camp. And one day he decided, I'm down in town, I'm going to go to the movie. And here she was. And he was all scraggly and had the beard, been in the mountains, and sat by her, and they watched the movie. And sometime in there, he reached over and took her hand and stole her class ring off of her finger and said, I'll give it back when you go on a date with me. And when she got home, her parents were mad because you'll never get that back. And you made 10-cent payments on it. It was $11 and some change. And she made 10-cent payments for that ring, and you'll never see it again. But she did go on a date with them. they dated 6 months, and it was Christmas, and they went to find a tree, and that's a whole nother story about my grandma thinking it was going to be this big romantic day out, and Uncle Jim went with, and it wasn't very romantic. But they got back to the house, and he proposed to her, and she was so excited she didn't even answer. She just thought, well, yeah, of course, and ran upstairs to tell her parents. And her dad's response was, "Why would you want to marry that damned old hillbilly?"
Yeah.
So that's their story. They were married. They only knew each other 6 months, and they were married 67 years and died 88 days apart.
Oh man, so they were really in love.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that wild how that's, I mean, just intuition, like this is the person that I want, and that's it. Because when you pick them, you're a dumb kid. You're a dumb kid. So I don't know. I think that's super interesting. Okay.
So when my grandpa saw the house, he said no, and they didn't live there. Dad honored that, and they had a place in town.
What was his problem?
Our place is very remote. We live 10 miles from town.
And my grandma comes from the other side of the tracks.
When they went, she referred to this Christmas tree story. I don't know what pixie boots are, but in the, I guess that would have been in the 50s, late 40s. Pixie boots were all the rage, I guess. And my mother thought that they were going to go cut this Christmas tree. They're going to take a team of horses and a bobsled, which they did all those things. And Grandma and my mom, she was dressed, to the nines, wearing these pixie boots and whatever very, very nice secretary type clothes to go cut a Christmas tree. Well, when she got to my grandparents' house, to my dad's folks' house, Grandma took one look at her and said, "Well, you're not going like that." And Mom, when she says it, it was like, "You're not going like that." So they donned her with overalls so she could stay warm, and 5-buckle overshoes and a wool hat. And Mom says, "I just looked terrible." And they got all ready to go and got on the bobsled, and here came Uncle Jim to go with them. And so it was Mom and Dad and Uncle Jim to go get this Christmas tree. So it was they were all kind of shell shocked. My mom is a Barrett. Harry and Helen Barrett were my mom and dad's folks. And my grandmother was a hairstylist. She had a shop there forever on Rogers Mesa, and they weren't hillbillies.
To give you an example of that, Hardings came over in a wagon from Nebraska, and my grandma's family came over from Nebraska too, but in a car. That just tells you a little bit about that. And
not a lot of years difference. They came. My mother was. Let's see. My mom was a twin. I think she was about 5 years old, and she was born in 1931. So I'm going to say that they came in the mid 40s, something like that. Early to mid 40s is when they came. So times were a lot different than they were at the turn of the century compared to, because when the Harding family came, it was like 1890.
1890.
Well, it was after that, because Grandpa, it was like 98 or 99 when they came. So it was some 40 years later when my mom's folks came. So it was quite a bit of difference there. Grandpa was born in 91, and he was 10 when he made the trip.
But it had to have been earlier than the 40s, because you just said that they got married in 52, and she came over when she was 5.
Yeah, they did.
And they got married when she was 19.
Yeah, so my math doesn't really add up. I'm going to have to go look up some
I just heard numbers. I did not, you were doing that so quick.
Usually when I tell a story, nobody questions the outcome.
Sorry.
So try not to do that anymore. Regardless, it just wasn't suitable. It just wasn't okay. That house was not okay.
But she was happy.
She loved it. Yeah.
And so was she a city girl?
As much as Rogers Mesa could be.
Okay.
They were, they weren't. They were different than what we are, than what my dad's family. So I remember as a kid driving from the lower ranch to the upper ranch, and I don't remember who was driving, but we were in a Jeep. I was just a little kid. We were in a Jeep, about a 45, 48 model Jeep, something like that. And whoever was driving stopped, and my grandpa got out and picked up a tin can out of the road. And I remember thinking, well, that's pretty neat. You know, they're picking up trash off of the road. And we went about our business to our day. And when we got home, Grandpa presented my grandmother with that tin can, and she washed it and used it for something. I mean, they were poor. They were very, very poor. Happy, but very, very poor. So when they used horses to farm with, it wasn't because they so much loved the horses. That's what they had. They didn't have anything else. The first tractor that they bought, I still have it. It's a 1941 Farm All H, and it was lovingly called Clunker because in those years you couldn't get rubber, and so the wheels were steel, and so when you drove it, it clunked from one of those steel cleats to the next. And that was a big deal. That tractor was a really, really big deal to them.
I think that's interesting how you worded it, that they're poor and happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I just imagine just a really peaceful existence out there that, I mean, your only problem is just, sustenance and shelter. There's probably not a ton of anxiety other than that, right?
Well, you would think that would be true. We don't live a whole lot different than that now, and there seems to be a little more anxiety than I wish there was.
Yeah, but you have Wi-Fi up there now.
You have Wi-Fi. Yeah, we still live, I've lived 43 years off-grid, and not many people can say that. We have homemade power, and we do have Wi-Fi, and the power was off this morning. Got too cold, and so things kind of didn't work well. And so trying to run a shop, trying to run a ranch. We're calving now. Calves are cold, trying to get them warm. And there's just a lot of challenges. We say we live off grid. Oh, I'd love to live off grid. Yeah, prove it. It's hard. It's very difficult. And that road is really, really long. It's Gunnison County by only about a quarter of an inch, and so they don't know we live there. And we get very few perks from Gunnison County.
I have a time lapse of my drive. One of my drives out there in the snow, I time lapsed it because it's really hard for people to understand what that road really like to drive that. That's pretty unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a challenge.
Until 2 years ago, we hauled every ounce of our water. Hauled it. So showers, laundry, dishwasher, you are really stingy with it. We still are, but we finally got filters, and so we don't have to haul water anymore. But so the ranch is 120 years old, and we've only had to not haul water for the last 2.
Wowzers. Yeah, you showed me the filters. I didn't realize how new that was to your house.
You don't have to be crazy to live there, but it really helps. It helps a lot. Yeah. So we've just kind of morphed into that. My grandfather, he did everything with a shovel. Tough. There's a place down the road from us called the Porter Place. The house is gone now, but their early married years, they lived there. And in Grandma's diary, Grandpa was building a fence around the place, and he built it in the wintertime. And he would go out and shovel down through 3 feet of snow to get to the ground to dig a hole 3 foot deep to put a post in it. And I'm not going to say I wouldn't do that, but, times are different. I complain if there's a hole in the seat of the skid loader or something, now.
Yeah.
So it's just a different time. It's what they're used to. But that tradition runs deep. I have a lot of Grandpa's old tools, and still have some of his double trees from the horses, and a few things like that are still around there.
So if we went back to horses, you could probably adapt again. You have what it takes.
We have since in the last 5 years or so is the first time that we've never had teams on the ranch. Our team got older, and so I sold them thinking that we would replace them. We were kind of living in a vacuum at the time. We sold that team, and I thought I would go buy a younger team. not realizing how much they cost. And so our team went to Kansas. We delivered them out there. They were a little older than what I was wanting them to be. So just in the last 4 or 5 years is the first time in history there hasn't been a team there of some kind.
And that team, their last team, they went to a children's ministry.
Oh.
So they're out there giving kids rides that are part of this kind of a house of promise, but a little bit different.
Oh, they're probably happy as can be, huh? They're like, I'm done with that mess.
Yeah. So teams have always been, we still have everything around there. And one day, maybe we'll get another team. We kind of switched the way we make hay. We used to little square bale everything. And it's absolutely the best way in the world to feed hay. There's just not a better way to feed a sled in a team or a wagon in a team. But on the other side of the coin, there's absolutely not a worse way to put up hay. Those little square bales in the summertime are just horrid. They're absolutely the most work that you'll ever have. And trying to store them, trying to stack them, trying to move them. And I just, I have a neighbor, he calls them idiot cubes, and I kind of think he's not too far off. So we round bale everything now, and I'm sure there's ways, I've kind of tinkered around with trying to come up with a way to feed round bales, but I love little bales. You back the sled in or the wagon in, and you load what you want and go on. It's just the best. There is no better way to feed than that. But, anyway.
So we got to your grandparents, and then did we get to your parents' meeting? Yeah, your grandpa said they're not staying in this house.
Yeah, so they didn't. They rented a place in town, and Dad was trying to work for some folks in town and trying to farm, and he wound up hurting his back, and it was in the hospital quite a bit, and the doctors finally told him if he didn't quit working so hard with his back that he wouldn't ever be able to work again. And so he took a job with the government, and we wound up getting transferred all over the country. We left the ranch, was gone for 20 years while Dad was working for the Corps of Engineers or the Bureau of Reclamation, depending on which side of the...
But your grandpa's still on the property.
So my dad started buying the property when he was a freshman in high school. He gave $7,000 for it, and he started making payments.
From his father.
Okay.
And my mom kind of begrudged those ranch payments because they came first before anything else. There's 4 of us kids, and we grew up. It was hard how we grew up. There wasn't ever any money, and we went from, I don't know, I think I was in 7 different schools from grade school to high school, and it was hard. And that ranch payment came first before anything else. So I came back here. I graduated from high school in 1980, and I came back here in 81 or 82, I think. And then Mom and Dad came. He retired then in 85, and then they came out and started picking up the pieces. The ranch had not been taken very good care of. The cattle and the permit we still owned, but it had been kind of run in the ground a little bit. And so it's still a homestead. It's very much a homestead. It's not finished by any means. It's hard to live there. We're still building buildings. There was never the barn. Actually, the neighbors tore it down and took the material up to their place and built a barn at their house with it's hard country, tough country. At one time, it's Harding Ranches. Even though we only own one ranch now, there was 4. We owned 4 different places. At one time, there was 4 ranches there on Minnesota Creek that the Hardings owned. And so it's still Harding Ranches, and we still lease some of those ranches, the neighbor's place above us, each way to the east of us, and then the 2 ranches there. And then we are so blessed to be with your in-laws over in Crawford. That is just such a huge blessing to us to be able to have that place. That's it's incredible, and I still I still thank God every day for that. That is just such a wonderful thing. So
Another story you need to tell is our brand, because that was your grandparents, of how we got the brand. And Grandpa was alive because he was being a troublemaker at that wedding. So you should tell that story.
I think that's two different stories, but when my grandmother and grandfather got married, as a wedding present, she bought him a brand, and it's the I/K brand, and we still use that today. It's on all of our cattle and most of our horses. And the reason she bought that is it's all straight lines, and that's real easier to put on a critter. And so when they got married, in the early teens, I'm not really sure of their anniversary, but it was very, very early in the 1900s. That was a wedding gift to my grandfather. And I have his saddlebags that have that I/K brand on them on one of the old saddles that it's an old Fred Mueller saddle that was built in Denver. And it was used when they bought it, and it's been used. It's been around a while, and I still have that saddle. And Grandpa rode it, and my dad rode it, and his brothers rode it, and I rode it. I used to break colts in it. It's kind of an old bear trap saddle, and anyway, still have that. And then what was the other one?
Well, and then I guess when your grandpa got remarried is when Grandpa was causing trouble at the wedding.
Think you should tell that story.
Well, so obviously your grandma died, or he wouldn't be getting remarried.
So it was my great-grandmother.
Oh, it was your great-grandmother. Yeah. So it'd be your great-grandpa that was getting remarried. And they were...
1936.
Okay, and they were there at the ranch. And my grandpa said that while the wedding was going on, him and the cousins were up on the schoolhouse roof smoking cigars,
mm-hmm.
up on the roof. And I said, well, how old were you? And he goes, oh, I don't know, 6.
That's how I knew it was 36. Dad was born in 29. And that wedding was 1936. And that was, the other reason I remember it was 36 is that was the driest year in history. My dad, Minnesota Creek nearly dried up. He said it didn't, but it nearly dried up in 1936.
Yeah, so 6 years old, smoking cigars up on the schoolhouse roof.
Different times.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The Harding family, like I said, they were very happy, but they grew up. It was hard. It was a hard place to live. It was really hard. They hauled hay off of that place, and Dad's got story after story of loads of hay and how big they were. They used to make loose hay, put up hay with a pitchfork. They didn't have a baler, and they would get these huge, big truckloads of hay. Ray Harding was my dad's cousin, and just these huge loads of hay, wagon loads and truckloads of hay that would come down the road there. It was just incredible. I know one story, I don't know why I thought of this one, but Ray was very, very, very hardworking man, and one of their trucks or tractors, and I don't remember what it was, but it wouldn't start, and so Ray was going to work on that truck while the rest of them were making more hay in the field. And when they came by, they noticed he was sleeping out in front of the truck, that he wasn't even working on it, and they didn't think that was quite fair. So they went over there to kind of give him what for, and he had turned the crank on the engine, and the engine had backfired, and the crank came back and hit him in the forehead and knocked him out. So he was sleeping, but not by choice. He was out there, that crank had cold cocked him out in front of that truck or tractor, whatever it was.
So I'm assuming you're really excited that Orrin is taking to ranching, like fish to water. Mm-hmm. And so
6 generations.
He's number 6. Mm-hmm. That's pretty exciting. Mm-hmm. And I think he's going to be great at it, right? Like he's just born for it kind of thing.
He is. He loves it. He lives and breathes ranch. Just lives and breathes ranch. I just got to go on a road trip with him. One of our pickups, the motor went bad, and so I had to take it to Salt Lake. And so we just got to go on a road trip, and I don't get to do that. His mom thinks I'm not a very good
caretaker.
Is that a fair statement?
Very fair.
Are we referencing Are we mentioning the story?
We are mentioning the story
Okay.
because I feel like I need to defend myself. If you saw Amanda's post on Facebook, I got a bad rap, and
Yeah.
I think I need to defend myself because I didn't do anything wrong. I did nothing wrong.
So maybe let's tell the story, and we'll ask our audience if they're Team Amanda or Team Todd.
Okay.
And
Can we turn her microphone off because I'm pretty sure I know how this is going to go, but it's just I got a bum rap. I really did.
let's hear it. So what happened?
So they were going to go to Salt Lake to deliver the engine for our '05 Dodge. It's the motor is shot in it, and so some people are working on it. And so they took the motor out and took it to Salt Lake, and Oren really wanted to go with. And so while I stayed home and fed and checked calves, the guys were going to go to Salt Lake. And I don't trust him completely. He trusts everybody. He talks to everybody. And I don't want my kid to pay the price for that, or I'd have to go and hunt down the entire world. So before they left, I told Oren, don't talk to any strangers. Don't trust anyone. Scream if you need help. If somebody tries to grab you, throat punch them and poke them in the eyes. I went down the whole list. And if somebody comes up to you and says they have a puppy or candy, do not believe them. Do not trust them. Do not go with them. So they were gone all day, came home that night, and said, how's your trip? And Oren says, well, we stopped at a rest stop, and some random guy came up and gave me candy. What? Middle of Utah, in the middle of nowhere, at a random rest stop, a random guy comes and gives you candy? Are you kidding me? Were you not listening?
He wasn't a random guy, which I reflected this in my Facebook report. I had to defend myself on Facebook. His name is Steve, which makes him not random. We drove into the rest stop, and he jogged over. This rest stop kind of has some history about it. A couple of years ago, we were on a different trip. Amanda was with us, and we pulled into the rest stop, and she got mad at me because there was a school bus that's full of Christian campers. They were on some kind of retreat, and their bus quit at this rest stop. And so I asked them, well, do you need some help? And she didn't like that because we were on our way to Montana or someplace. And I said, what is it that I would have that you would need? And they said, we would give anything for an impact wrench and something deep socket. And I said, I've got that in my truck. And they just about fell over because we're sort of are in the middle of nowhere. There is nothing around there. And so I loaned them my tools to get their bus back going. And she didn't really like that. And so in the meantime, her and Oren had decided that they would go use the modern pit toilets. That's a nice way of saying outhouse. So you can...
So we went over there, and he really had to go to the bathroom. And he's not, at that time, he wasn't potty trained. So it's like, bud, you got to go when we stop. And he looked into that big old hole and said, I'm not doing it. I said, bud, you have to. Like, this is the only time we're going to stop, and you're not peeing your pants. So go. And he goes, no, Mom. The last kid to use it fell in, and he died.
So I don't know how
He never did go. He went behind a bush right there with everybody there because he refused to go in that toilet.
So we have a little history with this rest area, and I knew where it was. We don't get on that road just a whole lot, but I knew where that rest stop was. And Oren's a hillbilly, and he was looking along out there in the desert, and I said, there's really not any place to go to the bathroom. And he said, there's not even a tree to pee behind. He couldn't, there was no, So anyway, we pulled into this rest area. And I noticed when we pulled in, there was a man there that was following us on foot as we were pulling around. He was kind of chasing us on foot, and I guess that didn't really bother me, so we stopped. And
yeah, it's red flags all over it, right?
It was good, and so we stopped, and I let my truck idle for a minute to let it kind of cool down or whatever. And so I needed to lock the door. I had some stuff in there that I didn't want just anybody to get into. And so I got out and I locked the door, and we walked over to go to the restroom. And here this guy shows up, Steve shows up. He's not a stranger. His name's Steve. And he said, "What's that engine in the back of your pickup?" And so I told him, and he said, "Can I go look at it?" And he started asking me questions. And I said, "You know what? I'm going to float away. If I don't get into this little building, I'm going to float away." And he says, "Oh, okay. Well, if you don't mind, I'll just go over to your truck and look at the engine, and maybe I'll take some photos." And I said, "Sure, that'll be okay."
Random guy goes to your truck with tools in the back. Just saying.
So we went into the modern pit toilet, to the outhouse, and Oren still had a problem. He looked way down in the bottom there. And anyway, so we did what we needed to do, and we came back out, and we walked over to the truck, and sure enough, this guy was looking at the engine and taking pictures and asking questions, and everything was just fine. And he looked down at Oren. This guy's probably 60, I suppose, 65 maybe, and he looks down at Oren, and he says, "Are you Superman?" And Oren looks at me, and he looks at this guy, and he says, "No." And he said, "Do you speak Jedi?" And Oren says, "I'm 7. And he says, so he raises up, he has on a hoodie, so he raises up his hoodie, but he got a little deep, and he picked up his T-shirt too, so he flashed Oren his big round belly, and Oren wasn't really impressed with that either. And then pretty soon he sorted out his shirt, and it did say something about Jedi on his shirt. And the guy says, "What do you think of that, of my shirt?" And Oren says, "I don't know how to read." So he wasn't very impressed with the Jedi. And we talked along there a little bit. And finally I said, we got to get on the road. We got to get going. And so we piled back in the pickup, and we drove around to get out. Well, we had to drive by this fellow's pickup to get out. And as we drove by, he came over there with a red Twizzler package of licorice, and he dug out 4 pieces, and he handed it to my window, not Oren's, to my window, and gave us 4 pieces of licorice. Now, the part of this story there's several parts of the story that were not on Facebook. Oren doesn't like licorice, and I know that Oren doesn't like licorice, and there were 4 pieces that I didn't have to share. So all of those things made perfect sense, because I got all 4 pieces of red licorice.
Of stranger candy that, I said on Facebook, I'm surprised their trip didn't turn into a trip, but I got some comments on that too.
So I did nothing wrong. This guy was very affluent, because he had just told me that he bet $20,000 in Las Vegas and won $6 million.
So he's a liar too.
His name is Steve. He's fine. He has good Twizzler red licorice, and his truck was broke down. He was waiting on a tow truck, and he says, when you start into price, you're going to meet the tow truck. And sure enough, we didn't go hardly any distance at all, and here comes a tow truck. The guy's on the up and up. I scored 3.5 pieces of licorice, because Oren was bound determined that he liked licorice, which I know he doesn't. So this morning when we got in the pickup, Oren said, "There's my licorice," and he had it stuffed down in the corner of the seat. So anyway, nothing at all wrong with I didn't do anything at all wrong. I scored 3 pieces of
stranger danger. Do not trust anybody.
Yeah. So we'll put this on the podcast. We can do a poll. So we'll put a poll on there.
Yeah, team keeping kids safe or kids endangerment. Let's see.
I bet you it's going to come down to age.
I
bet you it's going to be, if you're from the previous millennia, then it's fine. And if you're 30 years old,
or it's going to
having a connection
men and
right
women.
now.
Women might go, "Are you kidding me?" And men might go, "Oh, it's fine."
The proof weighs.
The guy talked about a motor.
The proof weighs very, very heavy on my side, because Oren is fine. We made it home. He drove the last half. He was not impaired at all. He did a fine job.
He had to come home. Before they left, he said, "I know if Oren doesn't come with me, I might as well not come home either." I'm like, "Yep."
Yeah, that's I don't know. I think it's I don't want to skew our audience, but
I do. She judged way too harshly.
I wish I could put bets down right now.
Well, the proof is upstairs. Oren is fine.
This time.
Okay. Is it are we caught up with your story? Do you want to share about how you enter into all this?
The stork brought me. I always knew, I'm like Orrin, I always knew that I was going to live on the ranch. And so growing up, I remember in 4th grade, some teacher said, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I knew what I wanted to do then. And so it became very natural for me. Every job I ever had from the beginning of time was ag related. It was any time I could work on farms or ranches, I did. We didn't, as a kid growing up, we never got to live on a ranch, but I worked for ranches and anybody around that I could, I did. So I came out here, like I said, I think in 82, and I actually worked for the neighbors. I lived on their place because there wasn't any place to live on ours. And so I had a 5-year plan, and that took me 25 years to fulfill that to make good on that 5-year plan. So I built our house, and we moved into it in 2008, and which happens to be there on Mom and Dad's place, too, on the home place. And then Mom and Dad went to California, I don't know what year, in 2016.
2016.
So they moved off, and I moved on in 2008, and they moved off in 2016. And we're still fighting it every day. I used to work for a guy, and that's what he would say is, well, how's it going? He's like, I'm still fighting it every day. And so
your parents are still alive?
No, they died.
I guess it's been 9 years.
2019, it was right before COVID, because we were all really glad they weren't around for all that.
Yeah.
But they died 88 days apart. My grandma died first. They were in that Paradise Fire in California, and they barely made it out, and all that smoke affected her lungs, and so that's what she actually died from, is pneumonia from the smoke that she inhaled, is what the doctors thought. And so then 88 days later, my grandpa followed.
And what part of California is this?
Northern, around Paradise, Chico, up in that area.
Okay.
My grandma was a twin, and so her twin sister lived in California. And up here on the ranch, with the elevation, they were having to wear oxygen, and they didn't really like it. So my grandma decided, she called it snowbirds. They were going to go to California during the winters and the ranch in the summer, and that's how it started. And then when they got there, everything was so nice, and they didn't have to wear oxygen. And my grandpa was thrilled with, like, water coming out of the refrigerator door and ice and a trash service and UPS coming to the door, and they loved it. And so they stayed there, and she got to be with her twin sister. And my grandpa said that she followed him around for 65 years, and he can follow her around for a little bit.
Yeah, it is the comforts of living in the city and the access that you have to stuff. Yeah, it's very enticing.
They walk to get their mail. Our mailbox is 5 miles down the road. And my dad and their little dog would walk to the end of the block there. And my cousins were gracious enough to help them with a kind of an assisted living deal there. So there weren't steps. Everything was ramps, and it was kind of geared for folks like my mom and dad, gated community there. But anyway, it was a very easy, nice walk from their door down to the mailbox.
But your experience right now is pretty extreme. Like what I mean by that is somebody might be 10 miles from town, but it's a straight line or a paved road. You're like, I mean, to say that for an F-150 struggles to get up there, that's rough. And none of your neighbors actually live there full time, right? You're the only one that actually lives there. Because when I'm driving, it's where your mailbox is. That's where the last, and that's, you're still 5 miles of difficult road. So I think that's kind of, I mean, that's really like extremes. Because usually when people talk about living on a ranch, they're not quite as hardcore as you are.
Yeah, I'm not trying to prove anything. If there was a power line that ran by the house, I would try to hook onto it. But we get the feeling that DMEA doesn't really want us, and I don't really know why that is. It's just very cost prohibitive, $500,000 for the power line, and they want us to put it in. There's just, I don't know why. But I have personally never talked to them, but some of my other neighbors have, and the neighbor that lives just down the road from us, he said they actually laughed at him when he asked about power. They actually kind of scoffed at him. Well,
and then even like insurance, insurance has a problem insuring the ranch because it's so far out there and hard for an ambulance to get there and a fire truck. And so it's in the middle of nowhere. Gunnison County, there's not gravel on the road, and so it's mud, and it's terrible, and you can't even, a four-wheel drive truck has a hard time making it without chains.
Yeah.
So
there's some days, Amanda can attest to this, I'd be ready to go do something different, live somewhere else. It's hard, and when you do that for about 40 years, it's really difficult. Turning on a light switch doesn't happen sometimes. You have a little job you want to do in the shop, and you can't use your welder. You can't, there's a lot of challenges. The payoff, I could name off 100 things that I wish were different, 100 things that make it really hard. Amanda could name off 100 things she's very, very optimistic. I'm a realist. I am
a realist.
I am.
I've been there for some of this realism.
Yeah.
Pessimist.
I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist, but I have lots of experience. And that experience it throws cold water on your spirit a little bit. And
well, like calving season is hard, but this year we don't have this much snow, but usually you're calving in 5 foot of snow. So when you don't have power and you have to use a dozer to go plow roads for the cows to have a place to lay down, it's challenging.
And you're generation number 5.
Mm-hmm.
And you are also taking to this like fish to water, even though that's not really how you grew up.
No.
So what makes it so difficult for you to say, I'd rather do something easier? Like, what is it about this life that you're just so crazy about?
Well, the challenge, for one, is...
Look at her face. When you asked that, did you notice?
She said the word challenge with the biggest smile ever.
Just look at her face. And that's why we're still there, because I can't muster that smile.
Yeah.
But just look at her face. And Oren has that same look.
There is millions of people in the world who wish they could be up there. I mean, they don't know what it's like, and so they wouldn't make it. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but there's a lot of people who want it, but they just want to have what it takes. They just want it. But just look at the beauty and the wildness, and just there is no beating that. And I don't want to be a hobby farmer. I want to be a rancher, and I don't want to be somebody who has to go work in an office. I want to be able to go outside and rough it. And I don't care if it's in ice water, and I don't care if it's in 5 foot of snow, and I don't care if you fall off a horse into a ravine. I don't care, because it's the challenge, and it makes stories that nobody else has.
And I think this is why somebody, I think it was your grandma meets your grandpa and says like, yeah, let's do this. Like, because I think some people are just psychotically just like, yes, this is the life for me. This obscenely difficult, miserably cold existence. I want that so bad. And they're just happy. They're just happy doing it. I don't get it.
There's a Chris Ledoux song that's called The Night Rider's Lament. And if you've not listened to that, go listen to it. And that explains why a person would live how we live. So on the way down here today, we were driving, and Amanda said, maybe it was yesterday, she said, look at the bald eagle in the tree. There was one or two bald eagle in the tree. And then today, I know it was today, there was a bobcat that ran across the road in front of us and sat on the hill. We stopped, and he was wagging his tail at Oren, and they were making faces back and forth. And that's pretty hard to put a price tag on when you're out there putting chains on in the mud, or you're out there in the middle of the night trying to do whatever.
Get a coyote off of a cow while it's trying to eat a calf while it's while it's being birthed.
Yeah.
That makes it a little difficult. But
ranching in general is not easy. Ranching at its best is still ranching, and this just makes it a little bit different. I'm not saying that that all ranchers have it easy and we have a little harder row. Ranching is very difficult. Agriculture in general is very difficult. Most people, it feels to us that the government, whether that's state, county, federal, are against us. If you were for us, we wouldn't be introducing wolves. They're thinking about grizzly bear. They're thinking about Wolverine. That wouldn't happen. Why are they? why? What's the good of that? I don't understand that. And there's this vast amount of people that don't understand that their food doesn't come from the grocery store. We feed them. People like us, people in this valley. I wish somebody like Robbie or somebody was here and they could tell you how many dollars this valley generates in agriculture. And we're quiet. We're the silent minority. We don't toot our own horn maybe as much as we should, but the cattle you see in the field, when you drive by and you see cattle, you should be glad that you're seeing cattle and not houses, because that's the choice. If you're not going to see us, if you're not going to help support us, most of us will sell out. If we have to leave, we will sell out to the highest bidder, and that's houses. And the western slope of Colorado is very desirable. People want to live here. And so if we had a little bit of help, we as an industry, if we had a little bit of help, we appreciate that the Mountain Land Initiative was voted out. I understand that there's a chance that this wolf deal, the introduction of wolves, could be stopped on the next midterms in the 26th election. I don't know what that's going to do for us. I really don't know what that bill says. I really don't. But maybe that would be something for us. But it's very difficult, us in agriculture, whether you're growing fruit, whether you're growing cattle or something in the middle, it's very difficult, and I don't think people understand that it's a 24/7 job.
When I still had my photography business, one of the models was a rancher, and it was kind of interesting because we had this very same conversation back in 25 years ago, and it was we were kind of discussing, and it sounds like you're saying the same thing, that as necessary as farmers are, there's such a disconnect communication-wise, because the rest of the world is on social media,
mm-hmm.
and that's the last thing you want to do is be on your phone posting.
Mm-hmm.
And so there really is no way of getting that voice out. And she was one of the few that had an active social media, because she's this really, there it's a little less unique, but in the big picture, a unique rancher model. Like, that doesn't happen all the time. Mm-hmm. And so she was kind of one of those few voices. I think you're starting to see it more and more. You can see ranchers on social media having more and more of a voice. And I think it's these kind of topics that I think most of the world that's making these decisions, they have no clue. And you could live in Colorado and look at these hills with these animals and not understand anything about how your decisions impact them and even yourself. Because you're right. We go to the store and I might think like, oh, okay, so and I think the perception is a lot of these ranchers are rich, right? Because your property's worth millions of dollars, and so you just think, oh, it's these rich guys who are just greedy, and that's really the perception. And so it's that lack of communication, and there is a little bit coming up, but how often do you get to meet with those people that are, really concerned about these wolves being out there for some random reason, and how misguided they are, just because they don't really understand that when they go to the grocery store, they're getting it from a guy who is trying to keep those animals away.
And the other thing is it's not just meat. There's lots of ranchers that Colorado Cattle Association, they have lots of pamphlets you can go read about what cows actually provide, like down to airplane parts, things for insulin, cosmetics. It's even in rubber. So there are so many byproducts from cows. It's not just the meat. And the rich part, having ranchers be rich, yeah, the ranch might be worth that much, but we don't have it in our bank account. We'd have to sell it in order to get that.
Yeah.
And we were watching a cutting horse documentary on Netflix, and one of the quotes on there is, he said that everybody says, well, yeah, you got this place handed to you. You're a generational thing. It's just handed to you. You inherited it. And it goes, yeah, but trying to keep it is the hard part.
Right.
So, yeah, you get it handed to you, but you're working your little tail off.
Yeah, and I think just like with any group of people, you have, from the little I've been exposed to, I'm really glad I got to get in with you guys because I saw what the working ranch is like. And then you have what I'm gonna call like the show ranch, right? It's these guys who are just up for show and maybe are kind of ruining the perception for you guys a little bit. People who just have millions and millions of dollars to blow on anything and can have a piece of property that's not really contributing. And unfortunately, sometimes people conflate the two and they don't understand it. The people who are really putting the food on the table, they're not the ones driving around, $100,000 vehicles for fun and to show off to everybody else. Those guys, yeah, technically they're ranchers, but the people who put food on the table, they don't have that kind of disposable income. We really need to watch what we vote for and even what we promote for on social media, because people will jump on the bandwagon, and all of a sudden, like you said, you've got these predators out there that are eating livestock. You can't do it, and you're holding out because somebody's willing to pay you an insane amount of money for you to quit.
Yeah,
and
pushing us that way.
And so you could, at any time, be perfectly, live the rest of your life luxuriously, and then the price of beef goes up for everybody else. And I don't think people understand that when they vote for wolves. They're voting against themselves.
Well, then our place would be houses.
Yeah, and then you're looking at a condominium.
Deal. So those folks that you described are still our allies, because those folks that maybe made their money someplace else and then they come in and they buy a ranch, or some of them are buying several ranches, they're not planting houses. So that kind of a ranch, even though they are going about it a different way than what we are, it was not inherited. So they had to buy it. And they're not planting houses, and they're still growing cattle, and they're still fighting wolves, and they're still on our team. They went about it a different way than what we did. It's not wrong. Our way isn't wrong, and their way isn't wrong, but they are still our ally.
Oh, so, no, I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying from the perspective of somebody who is promoting these acts that are hurtful to the ranching community.
Yes.
Because they can't tell the difference and they don't understand what you're describing,
mm-hmm.
right? They don't understand your side of it. All they see is, oh, here are these rich people that just want their fancy big piece of property that they can retire in. They don't get it that there's that affects you and their price tag at their grocery store. There
is some of those that come in and buy these ranches, and they believe the propaganda that cattle are bad. We've had those that moved in right next door to us, and he said cattle are bad, and so we had to prove to him that the management of cattle sometimes is bad. Cattle get blamed for what the manager does sometimes. I've got other neighbors that have absolutely stripped the Minnesota Creek to the dirt, and now there's not any cattle allowed on those ranches. And it wasn't the cattle's fault; it was the manager's fault. And so cattle are not bad if they're managed correctly. And that's the difference between somebody that's been in the business 120 years. I think 120 years, you could say our place is sustainable. I don't know how long you have to be with a company or a ranch or a business to say that it's sustainable. But I think 120 years, I think you could probably say that we're going to be there for a while. And some of the others, they come in and strip these places and move on. And we have to bear the brunt of that. We have to defend that, and we can't. You can't defend how somebody else manages cattle or horses or sheep or whatever it happens to be. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it takes a lot of planning to keep your property looking like it's supposed to. You don't just turn them loose.
So, do you have any, like when you look back at your history of Harding Ranches, is there anything that makes you particularly proud, like looking back, something that you really cling to?
Orrin.
That's looking forward.
Orrin is the days that I get so discouraged and I'm ready to do something different, and Orrin is excited over Spider or whatever it happens to be. I'm proud of the 120 years. There's not a lot of ranchers that have been here that long, so I'm proud of that. I'm proud of our heritage. We haven't pissed a lot of people off. I think there's some people that don't like us, but I think as a rule, I think our name around town is still good, even being 120 years old. I think we're still okay.
The history of that place. We haven't, told some of the stories, but there are stories of Indians and outlaws and all on Minnesota Creek, and that part to me is exciting, is just the amount of history in that little circle.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to hit those up at some point and get all that. I think that's super interesting.
When you were talking a minute ago about these rich ranchers, we drove to Salt Lake to take that engine, and the truck I drove is 30 years old. It's 1997, and so I guess 28 years old. So rich ranchers, and I'm in a 28-year-old pickup to take it. We're one of the few, and we are changing our ways a little bit, but we are one of the few that don't work in town. Most all ranches around the valley, somebody has to work in town to keep that ranch viable. It's very few ranchers get to only ranch.
And that's something that I think the people need to know about, that our source of food is being threatened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just such a hard thing when you live in the city to see that connection. And it's obvious as it is to you. I think the rest of us who don't live that life, we're really blinded to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is sort of one of the next big steps for ranchers is, okay, let's communicate to the general population, because they're not seeing these connections.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's a fun life. It's a good life. It's a noble life. And we do get to see what others don't. If you get a chance, Chris Ledoux, Night Rider's Lament, and that song is real special to me, and that explains why we're here. All
right. Well, thank you guys one more time. And any last thoughts, Amanda?
I don't think so. Thank a rancher.
Thank a rancher. All right. Till next time.